if you could personify the relationship you have with like an AI like that, like
Yeah.
how would you describe that relationship?
I look at it as a creative partner. The agentic thing kind of gets you into that aspect of this is a teammate that I'm interacting with. And I think that is going to be a common feel as we go forward, is you're just going to have these little teammates. And some of them are going to be big, impressive ones that do crazy things. But really, it's I've got this team member that goes out and does something for me.
And I think like everybody in the beginning thought, well, the productivity gain is going to it's going to save me time, but it probably won't. It'll actually take you someplace new or give you new capability,
Right.
Which I think is what we should be talking about.
I think that is exactly right. But, it's not necessarily going to really work well for the thing that you want it to do, right? You have to do work to make it optimized for that
Correct.
thing.
I'm Sarah Nagle. I've spent my career leading research and product development within some of the world's largest brands.
And I'm Chad Reynolds. I'm a serial entrepreneur and founder and CEO of Verve.
And this is AI Powered by People.
Each episode will dive into the latest AI developments and talk to an industry leader to help you better understand and utilize AI.
We'll take you inside some of the world's most famous companies and share examples of how AI is improving innovation, consumer engagement, media, and marketing.
No matter what industry you work in, we'll help you navigate one of the biggest disruptions to organizations and people today.
Hey, Chad, how's it going?
Doing good. The kids are back in school.
Oh, yeah. School starts. Yep.
Yeah, I had the parent-teacher conference last night, which is always super exciting for a first grader. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
Trying to sit in those little tiny chairs, not for me. So
my kiddo started to. It's pre-K 4, so a little bit different. Curriculum's a little bit different, but more structured than the summer. It was pretty, summer camp. And now we're getting into a structured year, which will be fun.
I love it.
When will you be sending Vlad to the parent-teacher conference?
It might be a little while. It might scare people off. But
he's very friendly looking. He's sad, but he's friendly looking.
It's weird. Like he doesn't look like me, but kind of doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I get mixed reviews on him.
Reviews on him?
Yeah.
From you or from other people?
Yeah, I'm reviewing him. I think other people are texting me like, hey, this doesn't look anything like you. I'm like, I know, it kind of shouldn't. So, we'll see where, maybe Vlad shaves. I don't know. It's going more of like a Freddie Mercury look or something. I don't know. We'll see.
Man bun, potentially?
Yeah, he could. Yeah. I mean, that's the fun of it. That's the fun with this. You can change and morph him as you see fit. So
yeah. Well, we had a really cool week with our agents. So we released the generational pack last week where Jenny was already introduced, but she was joined by Millie, Xavier, and Bobby Boomer. So we got some really great feedback from our clients. Have you heard anything about our Gen agents?
Yeah. I mean, I think feedback on those, and then also we need to work on an alpha one.
Yes, Alfie. We do. I think also Zennial, like that generation that sits between X and Millennial. I think there's an opportunity for that too.
Yeah, and pets. I've heard from some people to like bring their pet to life. I'm like, we can give it a go. I know we're working on a pretty cool agent pack for this coming release. So you want to share?
Yeah, I can talk. Well, again, I'm going to kind of tease it a little bit. I'm not going to tell the listeners exactly what it is. It's coming in a week. The next pack of agents are not going to be based on like people, like Vlad, like your Vlad was based on you. Groups of people, like the Gen pack was based on generations like Gen Z. And then the expertise agents like Amma and Max and Art. And so this one will be a little bit different. And all I can say is it's not going to be based on a person. I'm not going to say yet. It's going to be really interesting. So I go to verve.com. You're going to see more agents populated on the website. We're going to be announcing it. We'll be talking about it on the pod next week. We're going to be talking about it on social media. We'll be promoting it. So stay tuned. It's going to be exciting.
So today on the podcast, we have an exciting interview with Dustin Williams from Google Cloud. So Dustin was our very first guest on this podcast to get the show launched, field CTO, and spends a majority of his time with enterprises to get to implement new and exciting types of ways that companies can use AI. So since it's been 8 months, I guess, since we talked with him last, we wanted to get an update on how just behind the scenes on like how companies are implementing AI projects, which ones are going out of proof of concept and into production, and just what does this next half of the year hold for new types of innovation, new types of insights, new types of AI projects. So excited to bring him back on the pod.
All right, well, let's dig into the headlines. So the first thing up is actually a Google product, Reimagine, which is found on Pixel 9 and the Pixel 9 Pro. So it is essentially a photo feature. So when you're able to take photos of a scene or create images, and you can select everything that's within the image that's not human. So you can't manipulate the human aspects of it, but you can select other things like a car or a tree or the background, and it automatically you can put in prompts to be able to reimagine the photo or reimagine the image that you're creating. So it's interesting to think about, you and I have used Photoshop for many years, but it's essentially that, but even more powered right on your Pixel phone.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tremendously powerful feature to quickly edit photos. And a lot of the examples you'll see on commercials and things like that are, very harmless, use cases of like, oh, the cat snuck in here, and or hey, there's a reflection on this thing, or I just want to quickly like retouch something. But then you have some other examples that you've been able to spot online. I know The Verge did a little bit of a teardown of some of the examples that they were able to generate with it. Mm-hmm. So it definitely creates very convincing imagery, in some cases like way too easy.
Yeah, like this one, it was like recreating a bicycle accident, and it was. I mean, look at the lighting, the placement, the angle is pretty convincing. If you have it in your mind now, you can create it. What do you think?
So I know that Google and others are working on watermarking around any sort of image, but it does make it harder to tell what is real and what isn't. And it's not necessarily just on this like phone release or this feature, but just across our digital lives are going to become harder and harder to tell what is real.
All right, next up, NVIDIA is sued for scraping YouTube videos for AI training. YouTuber David Millett claims the company unjustly profited from his and other creators' videos to build its AI systems. We're seeing lots of this. There's he said that the NVIDIA violated California's unfair competition law. There's a lot of big companies that like need a lot of data to be able to create the content that they create, and they need to go about this in a way that's fair to everybody, and specifically fair to creators that aren't as big or have as much money as a lot of these big companies do.
Yeah, I mean, this has been playing out for the last few years of just like where are companies getting their data to train and fine tune. This is not the last. This is not the last of these kinds of lawsuits that are going to be popping up, more and more and more as we go.
All right, and last up, let's talk about OpenAI's deal to train with Conde Nast content, somewhat related to what we were just talking about. So New Yorker, Vogue, Wired, others. So now it has a deal to be able to, and a multi-year deal to be able to access that information to be able to train its data. So again, we'll see more of this as well. We have to.
Yeah, I mean, as more and more data online becomes generated by AI, you need to go to original sources to get new data. So the only way to do that is to collect your own, or sign deals like this to create data partnerships. I think it's going to be interesting, especially with them launching their search product, where it would pull in specific articles and stories and links to it, so you can just read it all within one experience. So again, we'll see more and more and more and more of these because they need data pipelines. They need content. Yeah, so I mean, for digital publishing companies like this, I mean, this is definitely another way to monetize content, that they quote unquote already own.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll start to see many more of these types of agreements or relationships where you essentially have another product that you're able to sell. And big tech, they're going to be the buyer for these things. So more and more you'll start to see online communities, et cetera, monetize the people and the content they're creating on their platforms and signing these types of deals.
Do you think it will only be more of the companies that are struggling, like Conde Nast, needing kind of financial help? Or do you think this will extend beyond just the companies that are kind of in these situations?
Yeah. I mean, I think it definitely starts with, when you need cash and you need to come up with creative ways to monetize, what you already have. For other companies that are, they have cash, they can be much more aggressive. They'll look to create their own solutions on top of it.
Let's get to our interview with Dustin Williams, who was our very first guest on the podcast. He's a field CTO of Google Cloud and oversees their database of product lines. He can share what's happening behind closed doors within organizations. So it's going to be a fun conversation. He's great. You ready?
Let's go.
Well, Dustin, you are the first person we can say this to. Welcome back to the podcast. You were our very first guest when we started, and we're so excited to have you back.
Oh, do I get one of those like Saturday Night Live jackets for the return?
That's on the third episode. That's
the third episode?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
We're balling on a budget here, Dustin.
So. But I do. I need the logo. I need everything.
Yeah. It's in the mail. It's in the mail. We started with shoes, right?
I was going to say, yeah, like, you actually deliver. So when you do say it's in the mail, I'm going to believe you. It's in the mail.
Well, welcome back. It's great to see you.
Yeah, it's really good to see you guys too.
The world has changed quite a bit since you were our first guest 8 months ago. We'd love to hear about what are you up to now with Google, because you were Google Cloud CTO. Curious about, the evolution of your role and what you've been up to.
Yeah, it has been a wild ride the last year. Just the amount of time and effort that I can put onto some of these things has dramatically changed. So when I first met you, Chad, I had some time to actually sit down with you and work through things, and you talked things out with me. You told me what you're doing. We figured out better ways to do things together. But right now, things are just going so fast. People are just, racing to get things out the door. It's gone from, I'm interested into this is table stakes, and if I don't do this, I don't exist anymore. Some people are genuinely fearful, but I'd say everybody else is just afraid of missing out and being a part of getting these things out in their domain, in their products, and taking advantage of some of the things that they're seeing in other aspects of their life. Because I think all of our expectations now are changing, and everybody realizes that.
Just to take a quick step back for maybe the listeners that didn't listen to the first podcast, what's just like a high level description of like how you would describe your role?
I do a lot of things for Google, but mainly I'm a strategist. So my job is to figure out both internally and externally what we can do to grow our customers' businesses. I am a part of a team called the Strategic Outcomes Engineering team. Strategic Outcomes Engineering. We are a consultative team of cross-functional specialists who come in to advise on lots of different things, whether it is business strategy, product strategy, services strategy, architecture, solutions, whatever it might be, even tactical aspects of it. Like if you're going to do this, then you need to hire these kinds of people. So we get to come in and help people figure out, where are they at today? Where do they want to be tomorrow? And then how do you create that runway that allows them to grow and to, move as quickly as possible into this new version of themselves? The goal there is a very simple one, right? I mean, I work for a commercial company. Our job is to drive revenue. And, what I work on there is if I can help you do big things, then inevitably you're going to spend more money doing those things. You're going to spend more money calling APIs. You're going to have more data coming in. The more customers you have, the more money you spend.
Dustin, over the last 8 months, there have been so much innovation that has dropped, in the AI space, just across the board from all the big players, including Google. When we first connected, Gemini had just launched, which is insane to even think about because it just feels commonplace now. But, that was like 9 months ago. Since then, we've had multiple versions of different LLMs, kind of widespread adoption across lots of enterprises, Apple Intelligence, and also lots of lawsuits that have come at it.
Of course.
A correlation to the launch of new things. But I know more than anyone that how important data is, not only for those kinds of meetings that you're having, but also to power all the intelligence that's happening. Just curious your perspective on kind of what's happening in the public world where users might be generating all different types of outputs using AI, but then AI also needs this kind of quality data. And how do those two worlds coexist?
Oh man, it's turtles all the way down. I don't know if I said that the last time, but if I didn't, I need to say it. It is, I build things with LLMs to create the data that I use to consume, with my LLMs, that I give to users, that they give me data back in, and then I consume that again with LLMs, and I bring it all back for like fine tuning models and RAG. Yeah, the nature of data has definitely changed. And, I will say, for those who are more technical minded in the audience, there's a lot of data.
Yeah.
It's just so much. I'm working right now with a data set, and it's just 1 million records, or, 2 million records, I should say. But by the time I get all my embeddings built out that I'm going to put into this database, we're talking about 800 million embeddings that I have to put into these vector stores, and then retrieving that is become really the big challenge, right? And I may have mentioned this last time, but I'll also mention it this time too. There's a naive way to start off where everybody just says, let me throw my data into these things, and I can call into it and I'll get pretty good results. And that's a good way to start. It's quick, it's dirty, you can get it done in an afternoon. But for those of us who really build AI applications, what you really know is that you have to build data pipelines, and then you have to put LLMs in those pipelines, and those LLMs are going to help you to extract new forms of data, right? And that's kind of that data plasticity that I was mentioning earlier, where the data changes form, right? And you can make that form what you need it to be in order to be fit for purpose for the thing that you're going to do with it. So in the data pipeline, I might take, let's say, an email chain, and might run it through different types of analysis to understand what my users are saying in mass. Does it categorize as anything that is negative, that's a customer support, a technical support issue? Are they trying to tell me that they want better features? What are their psychometrics behind it? Can I pick up on, how they feel about the product? Even when you think of somebody yelling at you in email in all caps, there is an emotional connection there that we can uncover. And it can say, like, this person's very upset, but if they're very upset, that means that you're not doing something they need you to do, or your thing is important to them, and you can use it to extract that insight, even though it was not directly stated. We've never been able to do that before, right? That completely changes the nature of the game, because I can extract out facts and details and things like I could. Now it's easier than it's ever been. It's more expensive in a lot of cases to do it that way, but it can be more sophisticated. But now I can use logic and reasoning in these models to make predictions, or to figure out what was said there that was unsaid, to find what emotions they're expressing, or, maybe there's a factor around what their interests are that I can derive from it. So then I have to unpack those in a form where they are easy for me to retrieve. So I've got to categorize this information so I can filter down onto just those things. I need to put it fit for purpose for how I'm going to retrieve it. If I'm going to ask a question of the data, then you're better off forming that answer, right? Break those things out as question answer pairs. But I also will use this same technique to create the data that I need to fine tune a model to do things that are either too difficult to do with multi-shot and prompt engineering, or I'm doing at scale and I need more accuracy and I need more sophistication. So getting those data pipelines going, and then, it becomes a lot of the stuff that happens after this becomes about building custom models and using the LLMs to generate the data and to, using other techniques as well to create data models that you can then use to train others. So, and often it's a combination of traditional ML models and, LLMs, the larger models. So I might use a smaller model in order to make a quick classification of something so I don't have to process a lot of
Yeah.
data unnecessarily. The data pipelines, the fit for purpose data, putting that into the right type of database. And now that's another big thing that's changed is vectors are everywhere. And, it's easy to pick the wrong vector store. The stuff that's quick and easy, doesn't necessarily have all of the enterprise type functionality you need, like disaster recovery and high availability. So you kind of bounce around between it, but there's new things happening in data modeling. There's new things happening in databases. There's new ways of thinking about data when I can just reform it in all these different ways. I always say it's kind of like that scene from The Matrix where the little boy's like, there is no spoon. The spoon is just a construct. I can change the spoon to be whatever I need the spoon to be. That's how I am with data now, but that's how I'm with retrieval as well. But the big challenges these days is an LLM is a wonderful tool. It can do quite a lot, but we know that it's not great for being trusted for factuality. So we want to feed it the right information at the right time from right sources.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where all of those data pipeline needs come in place, is about how do you effectively pull out the right information at the right time and then keep track of how everybody's interacting with that data, what is used, what's not used, and being able to bring that back around in and create fine-tuning data, because every user interaction, that is an indication of whether that's good or bad, right? And you
Right.
can
Yeah.
base on it. So there's some people doing some really amazing stuff there. Augment Code is somebody that I was talking to recently. They're augmenting coders in a way I've never seen it before. They're pulling out the right snippets of code, and it's going to make you super quick. So the magic these days in an AI application really lives in that data pipeline, which then creates the right data, and then putting it in the right data repositories to feed the RAG when you need to.
I mean, one of the key areas we've been focused on, and we talked about it last time, was just having that that video data pipeline direct to consumer, right, which isn't necessarily on the internet anywhere. So feeding Verve directly from consumers, you can speak about your thoughts and feelings and feedback and ideas and all these kinds of things to also complement the LLM. Of course, if you get your embeddings correct and all that, but you start to get some really unique and novel insights and ideas that aren't necessarily on the internet yet. So kind of creating unique and novel ideas.
I actually would love to talk a little bit more about the difficulty about creating unique and novel ideas,
Yeah.
right? And where that stems from, and kind of some of the things, because I know that you are doing some really advanced things to get over it. And I think this is an area where a lot of people hit a brick wall because, at first these things are kind of magic, and then you poke at them long enough and you say, well, this is kind of very generic. It's just kind of saying this generic, meaningless thing that you could read in a textbook, and you ask it to do something like write poetry and it's very flat and boring, or you ask it to write a creative story and it's very cliche and overused things, right? So I would love to hear your thoughts a little bit more about what you did there to overcome it, but I'd also would like to share some of the things that I'm seeing on how other people are overcoming that limitation as well.
One of the big ways was asking consumers unique questions to try to get to kind of below the surface types of thoughts and feelings, like you wouldn't just post to Facebook or whatever. So I think it's in the questions that you're asking people. Mm-hmm. And then giving them a medium that isn't, I guess it isn't like written words. Mm. Sometimes it's like expressed in a different way. Sometimes it's visual. Sometimes it's, through what you're saying and how you're saying it, or how you're describing it. You can get to unique and novel things. But then, of course, like agents. So building different agents that can look at the data in different ways and put together unique combinations. And that's where we're getting really unique and novel kinds of things that don't necessarily exist. And that was probably the biggest compliment we had over the last few months, was that as people have been more familiar with I'd say like AI wrapper companies where they're just you're kind of generating responses, is that the things we were coming up with like didn't exist in the world yet. And so they felt more like IP that companies could rally around a new product idea or a way to talk about it. Felt very unique and novel and not a cliche, but that it was like powered by what people were saying. So we were just seeing a unique combination of unique data source that kind of get to the multi-dimensional expression paired with agents to get to like a multi-dimensional way to look at the data and combine it in unique ways.
I love that way of describing it. I'm going to give you a much geekier way to understand it for your
That's
audience.
Why you're here. That's why you're here.
Yeah. The important thing to remember here is the name infers exactly how to think about these things, right? They are transformers models. They take an input and they statistically transform it into an output, right? So the problem with that generic kind of overbaked feeling, part of that is just how they fine tune it in order to get it to scale out and be usable for a huge audience. So that's something that we should talk about a little bit later, is like they are purposely generalized. There are ways to make them less generalized. That's a good thing for us to discuss. But the thing here that you're adding in is that variability of the human element, right? So when you have that input and you say, if you pass in something very small, you are not really going to be triggering a lot of neurons in the neural network, right? That's kind of how it works. So if you say, tell me a story about a duck, right? It's going to tell you the most statistically likely story that is going to come after just that short amount of words. But if you give it more context and you say, tell me a story about a duck who, becomes a superhero because he's bitten by, a radioactive spider, and you've got spider duck, right? Now all of a sudden it's got something that's not so statistically likely to be passed in. And so when we add a human in the loop there, which I think is super important, we should always be looking for ways to inject people into these processes. That human is bringing in something of variability, right? Because it knows the context. They, I guess I'm thinking from the AI's perspective now. That person has the context of the world, right? They have a more nuanced view of things. They're more variable. They're not just going to sit there and say peanut butter and jelly every time, right? They might say peanut butter and honey because that's what they like, or peanut butter and bananas. That's what they like. So when you have the people in there and they're, interacting in that way, they could be firing things that are, one, less statistically likely, which is going to create things that are more novel. But then they also might be bringing out emergent properties. And that is a really, really cool thing to play with, right? It happens with people, but it also happens with, your prompt. If you have advanced prompt engineering techniques, you can actually push and get emergent properties to come out. And you often know when you're getting there because you're struggling to actually make it do that thing reliably, because it's not a statistically likely thing to happen. So you have to do quite a lot to push it to that place. I'm a musician, and I have always been machine augmented. I've always been a digital musician since I very first started. So I don't see a problem with using machines to help me in the areas that I'm terrible at. And I started to use AI in multiple ways across my musical workflow. And one of the things that I wanted to do was write music lyrics. And all my music is kind of based around techno and industrial and kind of the music that I started off with when I was younger.
What kind of lyrics happen in that?
Well,
Is it
industrial can
like
have great lyrics.
chanting? Are we
Oh
doing
no,
chanting? Are we
they
doing?
tend to be very dark and dystopian, you know,
I'm
pretty
like
much.
going back to Berlin. I'm
Will you
like, all
please
right,
send it to us so we
yeah.
can lay it over?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They tend to be very dark and dystopian, very moody. You know, a
Sounds like
very
my kind of music.
anti-authority.
Yeah,
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 yeah. It's
yeah,
pretty
Right.
much everything that people say the AI is going to be. That's the
yeah.
kind of thing I like to make music about. It's terrible at writing lyrics. It's so terrible at writing lyrics. But I came up with a means to overcome it, right? By pushing for these emergent properties. So I worked out this workflow where the first thing I did is I started breaking down some of the music that I really liked that I wanted to take elements from and derive, you know, some sort of kind of framework to build that out. So I took, I don't know if you guys have ever come across like rap god level lyrics. So it's a trend in hip hop where somebody will do like a crazy long, sophisticated rhyme that's got lots of word interplay and polyrhythms and all these sorts of things in the words. And I then analyzed those things and got the phonetic structure and then got the LLMs to explain to me what those rhyming structures were and were able to create a model of how those songs were written. Then I took a song, I took a short story that I wrote about a nightmare that I had that was super awesome. And I
Can you give us the
ran.
high points on that one? What?
Yeah, it was kind of like one of those malevolent ones where you wake up and there's like, you know, this being like an alien or something like that dissecting you. So I was having this dream as if there was some malevolent creature, you know, kind of haunting me and you know, trying to dissect me. There's a part of the song where it's like, you want to dissect me so you can see if I have a soul, right? But you'll never find it.
This
Go
went
away.
dark. This went
Yeah,
so dark so
I
fast,
know, I
Dustin.
know. Wait, no, it gets darker because I sat there and I said, I want, okay, the lyrics were coming out great. It was getting very dark and very horror movie. But then I said, I want you to have Edgar Allan Poe and John Carpenter and, you know, Stephen King. I want you to go through it and give me feedback on how to make this story better.
Mm,
And then I took those lyrics and I fed them into Sunio and I just went through an iterative process of generating lots of different versions of it until I landed on something that was really kind of good. And I got this version of the song sketched out. And now I've been deconstructing that and replacing it out with my own instruments and, you know, my own singing. But it basically helped me to get to a place where I've never been able to get to as a musician by breaking it down in this way and doing things in a new and interesting approach. But that's the kind of thing that I've been
yeah.
seeing like really innovative people are doing with their businesses and their products, right?
Can I ask how, if you could personify the relationship you have with like an AI like that, like
Yeah.
how would you describe that relationship?
I look at it as a creative partner. You know, I mean, the agentic thing kind of gets you into that aspect of this is a team mate that I'm interacting with. And I think that is going to be a common feel as we go forward, is you're just going to have these little teammates, and some of them are going to be big, impressive ones that do crazy things. But really it's I've got this team member that goes out and does something for me. In this case, you know, it helped me write better lyrics, and then Sunio helped me to create better arrangements, you know. So, and then I will use other things to help me to get to other places. But it's really hard to get that creativity out of them by just saying, give me creative stuff,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I know I told this big complicated story about how I make music and all this sort of stuff, but the importance there is not necessarily the workflow that I did. It's the level that I went to feed the AI something novel that was going to allow it to do something that it was not statistically likely to do. And I was able to bring out the emergent properties there of it, knowing how song lyrics works and knowing how to scientifically break that thing down into linguistic structures, right? While at the same time making myself able to do something that I've never been able to do before,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Took me a long time to work out that workflow though.
I guess take it into the context of like the physical world. I mean, it's just like walking up to an individual and handing them a giant file folder and say, analyze this or write me
Yeah,
a song, right?
yeah.
you're not going to be able to do it on the fly. But if you get into a room, set up the space, that you're creating a framework of how we're going to work together, right? And it's going to be a process. You're not going to get there in the first few minutes. It might take a while to get there, but you're going to end up in a really special spot. And I think like everybody in the beginning thought, well, the productivity gain is going to be, it's going to save me time, and it will, but it probably won't.
Right.
It'll actually take you someplace new or give you new capability,
Right.
which I think is what we should be talking about.
And I think that is exactly right, but it's not necessarily going to really work well for the thing that you want it to do, right? You have to do work to make it optimized for that
Correct.
thing. What you guys do around, bringing somebody through a long form journey, there requires quite a lot of things to go into that. Like, how do you structure it? Like, this is one of the biggest things that keeps coming up over and over again. People just lose control of these things. I gave it to my users, they interacted with it, and it just went into an endless chat session, and I'm burning through massive amounts of API calls. And at the end, we really didn't do anything meaningful. But being able to say, I have a structure that I'm bringing the user through, and it is a guided, journey. And as they go through every stage, there are things that have to happen, and I have to make sure that those things happen, and they have to be reliable, and they have to be high quality. That's where the really interesting stuff happens, right? To me, that's when you're starting to hit that walk stage where you are solving something that is not commoditized. Everything that is in the crawl stage that's going to be commoditized is going to be so overdone that it's just going to break it, right? Like content marketing, I think it's going to fundamentally change. I don't think we should be writing content in the same way. We should probably be writing content for AI to consume, and it should be things that we need to communicate that are factual, things that it needs to know. But writing an endless how-to article, or how to get started with this, or how to save, more money on your groceries, all those things, it's just gone now. Anybody can do that. Anybody can do it and come up with just a good example of that from it. But to sit there and say, I'm actually going to help you to understand the entire discovery and enablement that comes when somebody has to figure out a new product to buy, or a new service to buy, or how to go do something different in their life, whatever it is. And that normally would have taken them huge amounts of effort. And there's usually a big learning curve that comes in. And that is where the ball's moved to now, right? It's not about, let me get you into the top of my funnel anymore. It's, the funnel isn't the same. The funnel is a point of engagement. I got to get them to engage with me with this thing. And then I've got to get them to the point where they find the value that makes sense for them to convert in whatever way that we need to convert in. And I have to solve their problems to get that to happen, not my problems. My problems were like, I want to show you more of this because I want you to buy more of that, right? That's a my problem. But when somebody shows up and they say, I don't want that from you, then your thing shouldn't even react to that. It should be, let me get you to what you want as quickly as possible. And let me lay all of that out for you in a way that's easy for you to consume. And like I said, AI to AI is going to be a big thing. It's already starting. So we have to kind of prepare for that as well.
We've noticed with, some of our clients and the conversations that we have that sometimes it's a challenge to integrate tools into large organizations. Curious if you have any, maybe not specific examples, but, kind of tips, tricks on how to kind of move and, integrate AI into the process for organizations.
Yeah, that is the big question right now. Nothing really goes away. From what I've seen, we still have junk mail that was invented in like the 17 or 1800s. It hasn't gone away. We will need to change these things. And I think that in a lot of places, the integration should just look and feel like, again, like that teammate. So there's a lot of desire for people to say, like, let me get you to come to my platform and let me do, whatever it is that I want. Again, like, I want to solve my problem, right? But their problem is who we're solving. So if they expect you to be integrated into their HubSpot, that's where your AI lives. If it's their Salesforce, that's where it lives. If it's Google Docs, that's where it lives. And there might be times where they're on your platform, and there might be times where they're talking to your agents directly, but it should feel a lot like collaborators, but with more transparency. And I think that transparency around the collaboration is really the big nuance there. So if I'm going to be working on a strategy with my teammates, then if they make a comment and they say we shouldn't probably do this, or I have some concerns around this, you can always just go ask them their thoughts, and you don't necessarily need that in a document. But when I embed my AI agent into that, then I need it to interact in the way that they would expect that interaction to happen. Just, we want to take advantage of their prior knowledge and, just their behaviors. I'm used to commenting on things. I'm used to chatting with people. I'm used to just seeing my teammates edit stuff and leave notes for me. That's what we do in those places, right? And it should just feel like, a distant coworker who's working behind the scenes. You're seeing the outcomes of it. You're having a way to interact with it. If you see something you don't necessarily understand, you can click the little explain button. You can see their logic and why they did that, where they got their information from. That's the important thing right there. Because one, they do amazing things when we do work with them right, but people aren't going to innately trust them, because it's the same thing with self-driving cars. It's like, I want to hold the steering wheel. I want to make sure I don't crash into a wall. So having that explainability, but then having it in the places where there it exists. The flip side to that is don't assume that the way you did things before is the way you should be doing them with this thing. It's a new medium in a lot of ways. And processes were often, made the way they were made because we needed humans to do certain things and we could automate certain things. But now when we relook at those processes and we think, well, actually I can automate 100% of this, or I can automate 99% of this, then you have to ask yourself, did that first process that I have, which was made for humans, is that still the same process that I have for my AI, right? And then that gets you into that situation where if you're able to answer those questions, then you can also answer the bigger upcoming question is, how does my AI interact with other AI? Because that is a platform in itself.
So Dustin, as you know, we've been obsessed around agents
Yeah,
and specifically multi-agent kind of workflows, right?
yeah, definitely.
How big of an opportunity is this?
I think there's a land grab going on right now. And I think there's a need for data defensibility. Of course, we are all living in the same zeitgeist and we are all narcissistic creatures. So I started off this thing talking about how do I create a Dustin, right? And that Dustin
Yeah.
did such a good job that Dustin didn't really have to work so hard in order to hit in a way that he's never been able to hit before. I think people are going to be rushing to build their own versions of these things, and the common paths are going to be the obvious stuff, right? Like, here's how I write content, or here's how I do this evaluation. All those things, we're all going to be able to build that very easily. That's not defensible. We all see the same things, and not everybody's going to be capable of it. But you mentioned those API wrapper companies. This is where they're going to live, right? Because it's going to be really easy for them to figure out those easy processes and just wrap some, orchestration around some API calls, and they're going to call it a day, and they're going to be fine. But the people who are really building AI-based solutions, you're going to need to go much further. One, it does go back to that thing that I said earlier, is what is it that you can do that we couldn't do before? So, maybe it's the sort of thing like you guys are doing, right? Where we couldn't survey millions or billions of people before. It wasn't rational. But I would say that as you guys grow, you will get to the point where you could do this with billions of people, right? Um, so scale is a big part of it. Being able to do things at a level that other people aren't doing. But then the other part of that is, again, optimizing and looking at this as a platform. Did we need to do this the same way, right? A person solves this problem this way, but did I need to do it the same way now that I have better means? What are the things that I wish I could have done that I couldn't do before? So maybe I'm running a financial analysis and then I'm creating 5 different scenario simulations off of that. And then I'm using another series of solutions to figure out which one of those scenarios is most likely to play out. That's the sort of stuff, those sorts of like really complicated decisions that we can make out of those things that is not rational for even the companies that can afford to hire the McKinseys and the Bains who really do this work for real. But if you're doing it every day, what does that mean in your business when you can do something every single day that normally you could do once a year?
You said something about a Dustin agent. Have you created an agent of yourself?
I think we established earlier that I've
Yeah.
got this dark side that I probably shouldn't turn into an AI.
All right.
No,
Okay.
that's just where I let out my frustrations of life. Yes, actually, I have numerous Dustin agents. I've got a Dustin agent whose job is to write with a really interesting writing style that not capable at all. In that one, I kind of mashed up a whole bunch of different writers using a very similar technique. That was where I first got it, that I used to analyze the songs. I first established that by analyzing people's writing styles and saying, hey, I want to write like this. I want to write where I use more, better, more vivid allegories, and I want to, have like a sardonic kind of sense of humor in there that I'm not capable of because I'm not that good of a writer. I'm an okay writer. So I have that agent. I've got the agent that helps me to figure out, what are product opportunities, right? My product manager agent, but that's actually a combination of a few different agents. And my agents can get kind of complicated because anybody can sit there and say, hey, you are a product manager and you are going to do product manager things, right? And again, that, as you know, that doesn't get you very far. It's your product manager, here's the frameworks you work in. You're going to pick a framework, you are going to execute that framework. When you're at this stage, here's the things that you do, here's what you focus on, here's the methodologies that you use, right? So I have these really complicated ones that I can just give them a bunch of data and then have them pull it apart and start telling me what I should pay attention into there. And it gets into what we talked about earlier, right?
Yeah.
It creates novel things. It makes predictions when these things are bad at making predictions. And that's because I've got this technique where I go back and forth with different agents through a managed process in order to create, a specific type of output. But the inputs and the outputs are completely dynamic, and then I feed one thing into another. So I do my research and then I feed that into my product strategy agent as like one of the inputs. And then I feed that out into like a go-to-market strategy, for another set of inputs. And I make sure all the agents are aware of the same things and they have the same goals.
Yeah.
So I
So,
have like 20.
so Dustin, you mentioned predictions. So I know we
Yes.
only have a few minutes left, but what do you think are predictions over the next 6 months of maybe kind of what's coming out in the world of AI? What are some of the applications, or what are some of these far out things that maybe we're not even thinking about?
I'm going to make a prediction, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to make a prediction, and I'm already cheating because I know people are already saying this stuff. We're starting to hit the trial of disillusionment, right?
Yep.
But I will tell you why we're going to hit the trial of disillusionment. Because all of those early crawl stage things, the stuff that we said is easy and that is not defensible and that we all see it, is going to be flooding into the market. And there are going to be a lot of people who are very disappointed by what they get because it would have been thrown together. It would be very generic. They didn't put the right amount of work in to make sure that it's got, the value that it should be driving. And there's going to be a lot of people who are going to feel very disillusioned by that. And I get it because again, there's a lot of people who feel like they're in a land grab and they've got to just get something out the door as quickly as possible. Where things are really going right now is companies like yours who are hitting the stride. Like I think that you guys, you're past the crawl, you're entering into walk and run because you're building your own custom models. You've got, this complex RAG worked out. You have these complex orchestrations that have to be done worked out. You're doing a lot of the more advanced stuff there. that is where you're going to start seeing all of the really most interesting things. And these take a while to work out, and not everybody's good at just trickling them out. Some of this stuff has to land in a big bang. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. And those are the things that are really going to be astounding, right? So, like I said, I'm working with a company that does code augmentation. I'm blown away by what they can do. It can look through an entire code base and it can tell me exactly what needs to change across 5 different files, and it can make me a better coder than I am, right? That's a very challenging problem to solve for somebody who's a senior level developer, and this thing is going to be able to normalize skills for people like me, who I hack my way through things and I make smarter people write my code in better ways. Now I can shorten that chain. I can get it out the door in a better form, as a handoff to the people I work with. But it's happening everywhere. We've even done it in emergency response for very first responders. How do we help you to manage that really intense problem that you're dealing with, the stress of that situation? How do you increase the accuracy? And there's people's lives on the lines with these things. But we can look at massive amounts of data and really sift down to just the things that person needs to talk about and say, I know the right resource, I'm going to get them there immediately. So, we're starting to see it in places where it is literally life or death. And we're not relying on the AI to make these decisions. What we're doing is saying, let me cut down the noise and give the people who have to make the best decisions just the information in the best way that they can. But I'm seeing it with legal documents. I'm seeing it with more, mature businesses like loan origination. How do I get these loans originated in minutes as opposed to days and weeks when there's all these things that have to happen? So I think but when those things land, they're just going to feel like they're part of the existing systems. You're not even going to know that there was an AI involved. It's just going to be, you hit the apply button and you got the yes. It's not going to be a parade of AI interactions. Maybe they will, but it will feel mundane. Like that's what the other side of that disillusionment looks like, is those things will be landing and you're not going to realize that they're there. And you're just going to be upset about the boring stuff that somebody cranked out in your favorite app.
This has been awesome. Thank you so much. I think next time it should be, we have a AI version of Chad that we call Vlad. So I think it should be one of your agents and Vlad next time. We could have a conversation.
Yeah. Well, I got to take on 20 Dustins. So.
Oh, you know what? Yeah. I'll tell you for a fact, and my wife will attest to this, most people can't handle one.
That sounds like a challenge to me. A perfect place to end. But
I think you could probably keep up with me. Most people can't.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Dustin. Really appreciate it. Sure. And we'd love to do this again and look at the predictions and see if it proved out.
That's going to do it for this episode of AI Powered by People. The show is produced by Steve Berkowitz and brought to you by Verve. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next Tuesday.